June 1944. Nazi scouts watching through binoculars from their positions in France saw something that made their blood run cold. An entire American armored division. Hundreds of tanks, thousands of troops, artillery batteries stretching for miles. They radioed headquarters immediately. German commanders redirected 2 full panzer divisions to counter this massive threat. But here's the terrifying truth. None of it was real. Those tanks were made of inflatable rubber. Those troops were painted on canvas. Those artillery sounds came from speakers hidden in trucks. And the 1,100 men who created this illusion? They weren't soldiers. They were artists, designers, sound engineers, actors. They called themselves the Ghost Army. And they pulled off the greatest magic trick in military history, fooling Hitler's Wehrmacht for nearly a year, saving an estimated 30,000 Allied lives. Tonight, we're revealing the classified operation that governments kept secret for 52 years. This is Voices from WWII. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button. What you're about to hear was classified top secret until 1996. The men who served in this unit couldn't even tell their families what they did. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications because we're uncovering World War II secrets that will blow your mind. Let me take you back to January 1944. The Allied invasion of Europe D-Day was just months away, and Allied commanders faced a terrifying problem. German intelligence was good, too good. They had spies, reconnaissance planes, and radio intercepts tracking Allied troop movements across England. If the Germans figured out where and when the invasion would happen, D-Day could turn into the biggest massacre in military history. The Allies needed a miracle. What they got was something even stranger: Operation Fortitude, a deception plan so audacious, so insane, that it would require an entirely new type of military unit. Enter the 23rd Headquarters, Special Troops. Picture this. January 1944. You're a young art student at the Pratt Institute in New York. Or maybe you're a sound engineer working on Broadway shows. Perhaps you're an industrial designer for a Manhattan advertising firm. Then you get a letter. The US Army wants you. Not for your ability to shoot a rifle or throw a grenade, for your creativity. The recruitment was bizarre. Officers showed up at art schools, advertising agencies, and theatre companies. They were looking for painters, sculptors, set designers, sound technicians, lighting experts, anyone who knew how to create illusions. Private Jack Macy was one of them, an architecture student who suddenly found himself in the army. Years later, he would say, "We were told we'd be doing special work." Nobody explained what that meant. We just knew it was classified. Over 1,100 men were selected. Most were in their early 20s. Many had never fired a gun before. They were about to become the most unusual combat unit in American military history. They trained at Camp Forest in Tennessee and Fort Meade in Maryland. But this wasn't normal military training. Instead of learning to shoot, they learned to deceive. They were divided into 4 specialist units. The 406th Combat Engineers created visual deception, inflatable tanks, fake artillery, dummy aircraft. The 603rd Camouflage Engineers designed the illusions and handled the artistic elements. The 3,132nd Signal Service Company created sonic deception, playing recordings of tanks, troops, and equipment through massive speakers. The Signal Company Special generated fake radio traffic to convince German listening posts that entire divisions were operating where none existed. Let me describe what they created, because it sounds like science fiction. The inflatable tanks were engineering marvels, made from rubber and canvas. Each one weighed only 60 pounds, but looked exactly like a 30-ton Sherman tank from 100 yards away. 2 men could carry one. 4 men could set it up in 15 minutes. They created inflatable artillery pieces, trucks, jeeps, even airplanes. But the visual deception was only part of it. The sonic deception was genius. Sound engineers had recorded actual tank divisions, the rumble of engines, the squeak of treads, the metallic clanking of armor. They played these recordings through speakers that could be heard for miles. At night, German scouts would hear what sounded like an entire armored division moving into position. At dawn, they'd see the tanks with their own eyes. It was perfect. It was terrifying. And it worked. But here's what nobody expected. These young artists were about to be sent to the front lines. And when the real shooting started, their paintbrushes and inflatable tanks would be their only protection. Before D-Day, the Ghost Army's mission was simple but impossible. Make the Germans believe the invasion would happen at Pas de Calais, 150 miles from the actual landing beaches in Normandy. They deployed across southern England, creating the illusion of a massive army group preparing to cross the English Channel at its narrowest point. Inflatable tanks by the hundreds, fake radio chatter, sound effects of construction and troop movements. They even had soldiers drive around in circles, creating tire tracks to simulate heavy vehicle traffic. German reconnaissance planes photographed it all. German radio operators intercepted the communications. German spies reported massive Allied buildups, and Hitler believed it. On the 6th of June 1944, when Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, Hitler held back crucial panzer divisions. He was convinced, absolutely convinced, that Normandy was a diversion, that the real invasion would come at Pas de Calais. He held those divisions back for weeks. Thousands of Allied soldiers who would have died in German counterattacks lived because Hitler was chasing ghosts. After D-Day, the Ghost Army deployed to France. And this is where the story becomes truly incredible and truly dangerous. These weren't rear echelon troops playing dress-up in the safety of England. They were sent to active combat zones, often positioning themselves between real American forces and German lines. Their job? Make the Germans think they were facing massive American forces, so real troops could maneuver elsewhere. Think about that for a moment. You're a two-year-old art student from Philadelphia. You're on the front lines in France, inflating rubber tanks while German artillery shells are landing around you. You have no heavy weapons, no armor. If the Germans discover the deception and attack, you're dead. Let me tell you about one of their most dangerous missions. September 1944. Luxembourg. The Ghost Army was tasked with impersonating the 5th Armored Division, a unit of over 10,000 men with 250 real tanks. They had 1,100 men and inflatable decoys. For 10 days, they created the illusion of a massive armored force preparing for a major offensive. They set up fake radio networks, played recordings of tank movements at night, hung fake insignia and unit markings everywhere. German intelligence fell for it completely. They redirected forces to counter this threat. Meanwhile, the real 5th Armored Division moved 60 miles south and launched a surprise attack that the Germans never saw coming. The Ghost Army had pulled off the impossible, but it wasn't all clever tricks and successful deceptions. Private Harold Dahl wrote to his mother in October 1944, "I can't tell you what we do, but I can tell you we get shelled just like everyone else. Last week, a German 88 landed 30 feet from where we were working. 2 of our guys ended up in field hospitals. They were artists pretending to be soldiers, but the bullets and shells were real. Imagine being in their position using creativity as your only weapon. If you're amazed by this story, drop a like on this video. And stay with me because what happened next in 1945 will shock you even more. March 1945. The Allies were preparing to cross the Rhine River, the last major natural barrier, before entering the heart of Germany. The Ghost Army was assigned to create a diversion. They would fake a river crossing at one location while the real 9th Army crossed 10 miles north. For 3 days they worked under intense German fire, setting up fake artillery, creating dummy boats and equipment, generating radio traffic suggesting a major crossing operation. German forces concentrated their defences exactly where the Ghost Army wanted them. When the real crossing happened, German resistance was light. The Ninth Army got across with minimal casualties. Historians estimate the Ghost Army's deception at Viersen alone saved 3,000 lives. These artists turned soldiers conducted over 20 major operations. They impersonated entire divisions. They created illusions that fooled German commanders again and again. But when the war ended, something happened that these heroes never expected. They were silenced. May 1945. The war in Europe ended. The Ghost Army had survived. Against all odds, they'd pulled off mission after mission, saved thousands of lives, and helped win the war. They thought they'd be heroes. Instead, they were sworn to secrecy. The military classified everything about the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops as top secret. The inflatable tanks? Classified. The sonic deception equipment? Classified. The operational records? Classified. The men were ordered never to speak about what they'd done, not to the press, not to historians, not even to their own families. Why? The answer was simple. The deception techniques worked too well. And now there was a new enemy, the Soviet Union. Military planners wanted to keep these tactics secret so they could use them again in future conflicts. The Ghost Army's methods, the inflatable equipment, the sonic deception, the radio trickery, all of it remained valuable military technology. So the men who risked their lives playing this deadly game of illusion came home to silence. Imagine what that felt like. You're 25 years old. You just spent a year on the front lines of World War II, participating in some of the most creative and dangerous operations in military history. You helped fool Hitler's army. You saved thousands of lives. And you can't tell anyone. Your family asks, "What did you do in the war?" You have to say, "I can't talk about it." For decades, they carried this secret. Many of them died without ever receiving recognition for their service. Jack Macy, who'd been recruited from architecture school, went on to become a successful designer, but for 50 years, he couldn't explain to his own children what he'd really done in the war. Ned Harris, an artist from Maine, came home and built a career as a painter. He never mentioned the Ghost Army. Not even his wife knew the full story. Then, in the 1990 seconds, something changed. Retired officers and veterans began lobbying the government to declassify the Ghost Army records. They argued that the techniques were now obsolete modern surveillance, and satellite technology had made these types of deceptions impossible anyway. In 19965, 1 year after the war ended, the US government finally declassified the Ghost Army's operational records. The story could finally be told, and when historians dove into those records, what they found was astonishing. Over the course of 11 months in combat, the Ghost Army conducted more than 20 major tactical deceptions, impersonated at least 13 different US divisions. Operated across France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Germany. Created diversions that historians estimate saved between 15,000 and 30,000 Allied lives. And they did it with losses that were remarkably low, only a handful of men killed or seriously wounded, across the entire unit. In 2013, the Ghost Army veterans were finally awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors in the United States. By then, most of them were in their 90 seconds. Many had already passed away. The ceremony was bittersweet. They were finally being recognized. But it was 70 years too late. But here's something remarkable that came out of the declassification. The Ghost Army included some of the most talented artists of the 20th century. Fashion designer Bill Blass served in the Ghost Army. So did painter Ellsworth Kelly, who would become one of America's most celebrated abstract artists, wildlife artist Arthur Singer, photographer Art Kane, sculptor Harold Lehnow. These young men used their creativity not just to fool an enemy, but to save lives. So was the Ghost Army real? Or was it a legend? It was both. And the truth is more incredible than any fiction. Now, here's where things get interesting and controversial. Some historians have raised questions about the Ghost Army that have never been fully answered. Question 1. Did the Ghost Army conduct operations after the war ended? The official records show the unit disbanded in 1945, but some veterans hinted always carefully, never directly, that certain techniques continued to be used. Were Ghost Army methods employed in Korea? In Vietnam? We may never know. Question 2. How many times did the deception fail? The declassified records focus on successes, but surely not every operation worked perfectly. Were there missions where Germans saw through the illusions? Were Ghost Army soldiers captured? If so, what happened to them? The records are suspiciously silent on this. Question 3. Did other countries have ghost armies? If the US developed these techniques, did Britain, the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany itself? There are hints in German military records of similar deception units, but most of those records were destroyed. Here's something that should make you think. The Ghost Army's tactics might be obsolete in an age of satellites and drones. But the principle, deceiving your enemy about your true strength and intentions, is more important than ever. Modern military doctrine includes extensive deception operations. Cyber warfare is largely about creating false impressions of capabilities and intentions. The Ghost Army's legacy isn't just historical, it's current. But let's not lose sight of the human element in all this. These were young men, boys, really, who used art and creativity as weapons. In a war defined by industrial slaughter, they proved that intelligence and imagination could be just as powerful as bombs and bullets, and they did it while facing the same dangers as any frontline soldier. In 2014, one of the last Ghost Army veterans, George van der Sluis, gave an interview. He was 91 years old. He said, "People ask me if I was scared. Of course I was scared. We were unarmed artists pretending to be an armored division. If the Germans had figured it out and attacked us, we'd have been slaughtered. But we had a job to do. And we knew that if we did it right, real soldiers somewhere else would live. That's what kept us going." He died 3 months after that interview. What do you think? Could a Ghost Army work today? Or has technology made such deceptions impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, share this video. These heroes deserve to be remembered. So, was the Ghost Army real? Absolutely. Did they fool Hitler's Wehrmacht again and again? Did they save thousands of lives? The historical evidence is overwhelming. But here's the deepest truth of all. The Ghost Army succeeded not because their inflatable tanks were perfectly realistic, or because their sound effects were flawlessly authentic. They succeeded because they understood something fundamental about war. Fear and uncertainty are more powerful than firepower. The German commanders who fell for these deceptions weren't stupid. They were frightened. They were fighting on multiple fronts. They were receiving conflicting intelligence. They were desperate. And when you're desperate, you see what you expect to see. The Ghost Army's fake tanks looked real because German commanders expected American armor. The radio chatter sounded authentic because it's what they'd heard before. The deception worked because it aligned with German fears. This is psychological warfare at its finest. Think about what these men accomplished with so little. 1,100 artists and actors convinced an entire army, Hitler's Wehrmacht, one of the most powerful military forces in history, that they were facing divisions that didn't exist. They did it with rubber and paint and speakers, with creativity and courage. And for 50 years, nobody knew. Imagine carrying that secret. Imagine being part of something so extraordinary, so important, and not being able to share it with anyone. Many of these men took their stories to the grave. We'll never hear their full accounts. But what we do know is this. They were heroes. Not the kind who charged machine guns or flew bombing missions, though what they did was just as dangerous. They were heroes who wielded brushes instead of rifles, who created illusions instead of firing bullets, and they changed history. Here's my question for you. How many other secret units and operations from World War II are still classified? How many heroes died without recognition because their work was too important to reveal? Subscribe to Voices from WWII because we're going to keep uncovering these stories. Next week, we're investigating another World War II legend that sounds impossible but might be true. The Nazi base in Antarctica. Fact or frozen fiction? Did Hitler's scientists really establish a secret base in Antarctica? Did the US Navy discover it after the war? What really happened in Operation High Jump? You'll have to watch to find out. Remember, history isn't just about famous generals and massive battles. It's about people like the Ghost Army, ordinary individuals who did extraordinary things. Their story reminds us that in the darkest moments, creativity, intelligence, and courage can be more powerful than any weapon. This has been Voices from WWII. The Ghost Army fooled Hitler, but they couldn't fool history. And now, finally, their story is being told. Until next time, keep questioning, keep discovering truth.